Welcome back to Royals Weekly. I am your host, Marcus Mead, and joining me as always, the inspiration for that fish in Star Wars that just says, it's a trap, my brother Mike.
I should know his name as an avid Star Wars. No, I'm not that avid of a Star Wars person.
Yeah,
but I should
compare
still
yourself
know
to the
his name.
actual avid Star Wars
Is it
people.
Akbar?
You are
Is it
nothing.
Admiral Akbar?
Oh, it is
Is that
Admiral
who it is?
Akbar.
Is that
Yes,
it?
good
Okay.
call. Yeah, I
Nailed
think
it.
that's it. I think
Nailed
that's
it.
it. I just call him
Way
Fish
to go,
Guy.
me.
Hey,
Fish
Fish Guy.
They ran out of ideas when they got the Wookiee, and they were like, the next one will just be a fish, I guess.
I don't know, man. I guess make it a fish or something. We can have fish in space. Oh, Lucas, you've made so much money off all that. On this week's episode, we'll review a scorching week from the boys in blue, deep dive into the resurgent offense, and preview this week's game. All the games, actually. We're going to take a look at all of them, sort of. But we do have an Apple podcast review to mention first. I want to get this in because it's an interesting one. So thank you so much. We want to remind you, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe on all these things. It really, really helps us out. Go subscribe to our Substack, royalsweekly.substack.com. Become a paid subscriber for $5 a month, and you get an extra episode every single week. I don't know if more people don't know about this, but if you love listening to us, $5 a month, you get an extra episode every week, plus an article written by me or Mike, or sometimes both. We tag teamed the weekly update this week. Mike's going to start writing more articles now that his school's out. We're going to have a whole bunch of content for you throughout the summer. So subscribe to that Substack, like and comment on all these things, and leave us an Apple podcast review because we will read it on the air. This comes from someone called Royalzilla. Great name. That's a great name on there.
It's
a lot better than the random string of numbers we sometimes get as from the bots. And so this is a very, very brief review. It just says, great pod. That's the whole thing. That's the whole review. That's all I need to hear. Thank you, Royalzilla. We really appreciate it. We think it's a great pod, too. Be like Royalzilla. Go out there and leave us an Apple podcast review. Like, subscribe, comment under the YouTube. We get a nice little chat going under there. It's a lot of fun. We also need to remind you that Royals Weekly, or that Bet Online is your number one source for the NBA and NHL playoffs this season. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds while the games are being played. When the games are over, head on over to our online casino. They mean Bet Online's online casino, and get in on the game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of their over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Don't forget to use promo code BLEAV for 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Maybe they need to write that as if it's going to be read by a podcaster and not by someone who works for Bet Online. We'll start the review of last week with roster news. Mike, we actually have roster news to talk about this week. It is a rare occurrence for this year. The Royals have been so healthy, luckily, we're going to cross that up, but they've not needed a ton of roster review from us because they don't do many things. They don't have many transactions these days, but they did last week have a few transactions. We'll start off with the thing that really kickstarted the week, and that was Royals reliever Matt Sauer was designated for assignment and has since been sent back to the Yankees. If you recall, Matt Sauer was a Rule 5 pick. As a result, if he doesn't stick on the 26 man for the whole season, he has to essentially be offered back to the Yankees. As long as they don't make a trade or something like that to require his rights, they have to send him back or offer him back to the Yankees. So he is now a New York Yankee again. Mike, what are your thoughts on the Royals deciding to cut bait with Matt Sauer?
Well, let me start by saying I still think, even though we sent him back to the Yankees, I still think it was a phenomenal thing to do. I think it was good process, if you want to say it that way. Where the Royals were when the Rule 5 draft happened, they were a team coming off a 106-loss season that needed help in just about every area of pitching. And so taking a flyer on a Rule 5 guy who you might be able to find a role for during the season is not a bad idea. It's actually a very good idea. It didn't work out. The team was winning. The team ended up in a position where that roster spot that he was taking up became more valuable than what it was to keep him here and continue to try and find a role when it didn't really look like he was fitting into a great one with this bullpen. So I think sending him back was the right idea, but I think taking him still was a very valid and good tactic to use, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. It costs them a little bit of money, and that's it.
Yeah, but then they actually get that money back now that they sent him back to the
It costs
the
them
Yankees.
nothing.
So, or do they get half that money back? They get half that money back, I think. Ultimately, it really virtually cost them nothing because it's a very small amount of money. It was time for Matt Sauer to go back, I think, as you mentioned. I don't think the Royals expected that roster spot to get so valuable because they didn't expect to be this good, honestly. And it's fair for them not to expect to be this good. They lost 106 games last year. And I think you made a great point that it was good process to select a Rule of 5 guys. There's a reason why the Dodgers, the Braves, they select Rule 5 guys even when they're good. Like, there's a reason why you do this sort of thing. One, just in case it ends up hitting, right? If it ends up hitting, great. You found a piece for basically free, right? Like, that's awesome. If it doesn't, you can easily just send that person back. And it really doesn't take much to protect, especially a pitcher, for a month of a season at the beginning when games are spread out a little bit more. There tend to be more off days in the beginning of the year to account for rainouts and things like that. And two, you're still not sure what your team is. Everybody's fresh coming off spring training. So there's a lot of, guys are just fresher early in the year. You can protect a Rule 5 guy in the bullpen. So it was a great idea to take him. I hope they do it again in the future, but it was time for him to go down because they're now really getting into that point where it looks like they're going to be playoff contenders. And so every spot in the bullpen really matters. You're really going to need 8 people, and actually more than that, as they sort of rotate guys up and down from AAA, to help you win every single ball game you can possibly win. That's the goal moving forward. And they're signaling that that's the goal by designating him for assignment and sending him back to the Yankees. They're saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and go for it and try and win this division because why the hell not? We're playing so well so far. And so I think it was time, but I also think it was a great – and this is no shade at Matt Sauer either. Like, Matt Sauer is still a pitching prospect and a decent one, right? Like, the Yankees took him back because the Yankees still like him. It's a really tough jump from AA to the majors. He has arm talent. I don't know that he has that swing and miss pitch that you really, really need at this level yet, but that doesn't mean he can't develop it because as we've seen, pitchers can develop more pitches. Pitchers can make their pitches better. So we'll see what happens with Matt Sauer. We wish him the best of luck, but he wasn't going to be what they needed in the bullpen this year. As part of that Sauer move, the person that they got to replace him essentially was Sam Long. They promoted Sam Long, left-handed reliever, 28 years old, from AAA. If you'll remember, Sam Long really shoved in spring training for the Royals, pitched really, really well. He went down to AAA and just continued to pitch really, really well. Mike, what are your thoughts on Sam Long now that we've seen him a couple of times?
I think he has the potential to be a valuable piece for this team this season as a whole. I like the stuff that he brings. I like that he's got some swing and miss stuff, especially up with the fastball and away to lefties with his big sweeping slider that he throws. I think Sam Long is – I think there are a lot of teams in Major League Baseball that would like to have a Sam Long in their bullpen right now. And so if the Royals can bring him up, I think you stash him in there. And I think I don't know if he's a high leverage kind of guy necessarily, but I think he's a nice bridge guy that you feel a little more comfortable with getting to Schreiber, getting to MacArthur, getting to some of those guys that you do count on in high leverage situations. Or if Schreiber comes in as more of like a fireman in the 6th or 7th, then you don't feel too bad with Long taking that full next inning where the bases are clean. And so, yeah, I really like Sam Long. I'm interested to see him more and more as we go here. But if you get him and he comes in and he's solid, boy, that's really good value that you found and were able to bring up for nothing and sending away Matt Sauer. So great job, and look forward to seeing him more even.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Long. He strikes me as a viable middle reliever, just like a viable – I don't think he's ever going to be great, but he's what Gabe Spire could have been for the Royals, but is instead for the Mariners. Like, just a solid middle reliever. Yeah, I'm still bitter. I don't know. I'm still bitter about bad decision-making in years past. I know we're winning now.
I don't know why that got to me, but you're 100% right, and I completely see that. For some reason, that just hit me in the funny bone.
Because I'm hilarious. What do you want? Yeah, my bitterness is funny to you. Anyway, I'm intrigued by Long, and I wrote up a section on him in the weekly wrap-up on the Substack today, so make sure you go out there and subscribe to that. So I looked a lot I was looking for the reasons why Sam Long might be more effective this year than he's been in the past, because he's had Major League time in the past. He's got about a year and a half of service time in Major League Baseball, and it's been some success and then some not success. And it turns out the difference is the performance of his fastball. In years past, his fastball got increasingly hit in Major League Baseball. So he did well with it. He debuted in 2021 in Major League Baseball. His fastball was okay. It was still his weakest pitch, but it wasn't getting crushed. But every year after that, it got hit harder and harder and harder, right? He's pitched in 2 outings for the Royals so far, and his fastball looks drastically better than it was in the past, at least in terms of outcome. It also looks a little bit better in terms of its rise. It looks like it has a little bit more rise to it, about an inch more, right? The big key for guys like Long is, can I keep people off my fastball enough so that it is not a huge liability for me? And so his fastball is actually working pretty well for him now. It looks pretty good when I see him pitch. He's got a whole bunch of breaking stuff. He's a multi-pitch reliever, a guy with 3 or 4 pitches at least. And so I think he offers something really special and interesting in the bullpen. If you can say, hey, Sam Long's our 7th guy out of the bullpen, I think you're doing pretty good. The guy who previously filled that role, maybe, Tyler Duffy, was DFA'd by the Royals recently. He wasn't doing so hot in his last few outings. He's the type of guy who looks like he's meant to be DFA'd, basically. Mike, do you have any brief, and I mean brief, thoughts on Tyler Duffy being DFA'd?
No, I completely agree with you. And we kind of always talked, or me and a friend of mine always talked and said, hey, that's kind of who this guy is. He's always going to be that quad A reliever who catches on with a team, maybe gives them some decent time, and then is gone again and likely goes back to that team's AAA team after being designated for assignment, because that's just who he is. He's a journeyman reliever, and that's what journeyman relievers do.
Yeah, and Duffy, I wouldn't be surprised if another team picked him up on waivers, because
it's a 50-50 to me. Coin flip.
Everybody needs dudes like Tyler Duffy, but at the same time, I could also understand if he made it, why he would just take the assignment, go to AAA. I don't know if he has the options to turn down the assignment or not, but if he does, I wouldn't surprise me. He's just like, no, I'll go back to AAA with the Royals because I'll have just as good a chance to get into their bullpen as anybody else's. They're actually a team that's competing a little bit. And so, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see Tyler Duffy again in Major League roster for the Royals. But for now, this was always going to be his path this year, at least. In a not great injury news, Michael Massey went on the 10-day injured list with a low back ligament strain. As a result, Nick Lofton was promoted. Mike, we just got Massey back from the IL like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now he's back on the IL with more back stuff. What are your thoughts on Massey to the IL and Nick Lofton up to replace him?
Well, it's a little scary, Massey to the IL thing, for a couple of reasons. One is one you just mentioned. He's already been on the IL with a lower back issue already. They classified that as lower back tightness. This seems to be the exact same thing. And so that's a little bit scary. The other scary thing is something that they said on the broadcast right when he came back, which was that this was something that he would be dealing with forever. And that it's not necessarily something that has a cure or a fix. You just have to constantly be working on it in order. And they used to say this about Lorenzo Cain and his soft tissue issues that he had early in his career with hamstring problems, quad problems, calf problems. That's, I guess, what we're going to be dealing with here with Massey with the back thing. And so you think maybe it's not going to be a very long stint, but you wonder how many more he'll be on within a year. And if this is going to be something that hampers him for his entire career, or if, like Kane, he kind of found a routine that helped him manage that for the latter half of his career. And so that's what I hope we get with Michael Massey. I'm happy to see Lofton back up because I think he deserves to be up here. And I think he fills a lot of different things for this team. But no, really sucky for Massey, especially he was hitting. I mean, he was really hitting the crap out of the ball. And so tough for Massey. Good to see Lofton was the choice.
Yeah, and it really puts into stark relief the need for a player like Nick Lofton in this Royals organization, when you know that Massey is probably going to be a dude who isn't going to play more than 70 to 75% of all games in a season, right? Like, because he just doesn't look like, if this is a chronic issue, then it will be an issue that continues to resurface over and over again. And you might be like, okay, we're happy to have Massey when he's healthy, but you need a guy who can be offensively productive and defensively solid for you when he's not, and that guy can be Nick Lofton. And so will Nick Lofton reach the heights of offensive potential that Michael Massey has? I don't think so, because Michael Massey has a very specific kind of game power that works really, really well. Michael Massey has no more raw power than Nick Lofton, I don't think. But he hits the ball at the right launch angle all the time.
How does he do this?
Yeah. All the time. Because he's only interested in pulling the ball, right? All he wants to do is pull the ball and hit it out of the park. So there are some dudes who are wise enough, and he's one of them, to know that like their best offensive outcome comes when they can pull the ball and they get the most out of whatever power potential they have. Massey does that. He pulls the ball, and his swing is such that he finds the launch angle that he needs when pulling the ball frequently. And so it's always going to have huge splits to like pull the ball to the pull side. He's always going to have huge numbers to the pull side because that's what he's trying to do. When pitchers pitch him outside, he's just not going to swing. And when they try and throw him, those right-handers try and throw him those breaking balls down and in, those are the ones he's looking to hook for a double or just hit over the right field fence. And so Massey has like a game plan that works to maximize his power potential. Lofton is not the same sort of thing, and he won't have the same sort of game power that Massey can have. But Lofton could be more consistent offensively, I think, than Massey over time. We'll have to see. He'll have to still get acclimated to Major League Baseball and all that still. But I think there's a chance that Lofton ends up being a little more consistent offensively, which is good. And honestly, if we're being honest, I want to throw this stat out there. He has definitely earned more big league playing time. Nick Lofton has. He had a 142 weighted runs created plus in AAA this year. That is like taking care of your business and making sure that you're promoted again later this year. On the field last week, the Royals were nearly an unstoppable force. They went 5-1, bringing their overall record to 34-20, which is good enough for second in an AL Central that looks like prime AL East right now. It looks like AL East from a year or two ago. Currently, they're 2.5 back from the Guardians, who cannot lose at all. I think they won again today. Mike, did they win again today?
I don't know, but every time I look up and we have a 6-game win streak, they have an 8-game win streak. It's insane.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah. And so they can't lose right now. But the Royals started this week by sweeping the top 3 starters for the Detroit Tigers. So they beat Tarek Skubal, they beat Casey Mize, and they beat Reese Olson in that series. Then they went out to Tampa Bay and took the first 2 games of the series before narrowly missing out on their 3rd series sweep in a row. Mike, how can you explain this incredible week to an audience who probably at least watched some of the games?
Simple. The pitching stayed great, and the offense picked it up a little bit. It's really that simple, and we're going to dive into more how the offense did later, but that's the simple way of saying when this team faces what are really 2 average, I would call them average to, maybe the Tigers are a little below average, maybe the Rays are a little above average, whatever. You can throw them anywhere in there. And you're a good team, you go in and you win 5 of 6 when both your offense and your pitching is working.
Yeah, that's actually a great explanation for that. I mean, it is that simple this week because their offense or because their pitching staff has been so consistent throughout the year, especially their starting pitching. The team waxes and wanes really with their offense, right? And maybe their bullpen a little bit, right? Like we saw the bullpen cause them to blow a lead today, but it was a 1-0 lead. The offense only scored 1 run this whole game. And so like, it's one of those things, right? Like it's really been raising the floor of this offense that I think has sparked this offensive success. And we're going to talk more about that during the spotlight segment, but you're right. I think when you see both of those things, pitching and offense firing on all cylinders, this is what the team can be. The defense is always going to be there. The defense is pretty much always going to be good. And so if the offense can just do its part, look out. This team has a lot of potential. Mike, in a hot week for the Royals, plenty of strong performers to choose from. I had a difficult time picking among them. Who is your strong performer for the week?
Yeah, I almost went with the layup because, that's my thing. I go with the easiest.
I don't take shots further than 2 feet. Okay,
that's right. So I almost went with Bobby Witt Jr. because he had just a monster week. With the numbers he had were insane. But I wanted to talk about this guy, and we're going to talk about him more later. But Nelson Velasquez, and I also wrote this up in the weekly wrap up this week. A little talk about Nelson Velasquez and wondering, is he turning a corner? Is he becoming more like the player that we saw last year? He was 4 for 14 this week with a double and 2 home runs. That means 3 of his 4 hits were for extra bases, 4 RBI, 4 walks to 1 strikeout. And so the thing that's kind of been missing this year, he has been walking quite a bit, but he's been striking out a ton, and he hasn't been hitting the ball out like he was last year. He's always going to strike out quite a bit, okay? And that's okay if he's hitting the ball out like he did last year, but he hasn't been doing that. And so to see him kind of hit some fastballs out, especially in the last couple of weeks, and this week especially, it's been really good. He hit a double that basically sealed the game for him last night. He hit a home run in the Seattle series that won him a game. Nelson Velasquez, if he's turning a corner, woo boy, he gives you another big slugger in the bottom third of that lineup when you already have a top of your lineup that's got plenty of them in there.
And you're starting to see a couple of chirps from some of the Royals commentariat who were leading the pitchforks of send him down, send him down. They're starting to be like, never mind. Go Nelson. It's one of those numbers, which I understand. I mean, we even questioned whether or not Velasquez should be sent down. And I think that's a question you had to ask given how difficult of a stretch he was on. But it's also important to remember that because Matt Quatrero does so much rotation with guys who aren't hitting well, Velasquez almost has his OPS back over 700 at this point, right? And so, one hot week for a guy in the lineup can actually do quite a bit for how it looks in terms of his performance. And so Velasquez does look like he's turning a corner to me. I think that 4 walk number is amazing because previously you saw him getting into a lot of 3-2 counts, and then he would, ground out or strike out or something like that. Got into a 3-2 count in his first plate appearance today, drew a walk, did something valuable for the team. Yeah, I'm really digging this version of Velasquez, and I think if he's got his timing down on those fastballs, he could be in for a pretty hot stretch. I'm going with another guy like Velasquez who doesn't necessarily play every day, but has been having a big impact, and that's Freddie Fermin. He went 7 for 16 this week with 3 doubles, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts, 5 RBI, and 3 runs. He contributed to 5 runs this week. He either drove them in or scored them. And so Freddie Fermin is just, we've sang his praises a number of times on this show, but it is so amazing to have a catcher who they can utilize to keep Salvador Perez in the lineup without risking injury to him, right? And so having Freddie Fermin is not just a luxury, it's an asset for this lineup because if you have a catcher who is a plus offensively and defensively, great. If you have 2 catchers who are like that and you can move one to first base and he's a plus there too, it's like the possibilities are endless for Matt Quatrero if he knows, hey, I can put Freddie and Sal in the lineup today, make my lineup that much deeper because I know Freddie can handle the bat really well. And now it's like, oh, my lineup that was 5 deep or 6 deep is now 6 deep or 7 deep. And I feel really good about the people who are going to be in there, right? And defensively, everything's going to be solid too. That's a huge luxury that not every team has. In fact, very few teams have. And so Freddie Fermin, ton of value for the Royals this week. Great to see him getting off to a really good start this year. Mike, there were a couple people who didn't really show out this week. Who was your week performer for the week?
Well, I forgot to put his name on the outline, but
I know I saw that, and I'm like, it's a mystery for me. I love it.
Do you think you can guess from those numbers?
Suspense.
Okay, Let me give the numbers first. Here are the numbers: 3 for 21, with 3 RBI, 1 double, 2 walks to 5 strikeouts.
I'm going to say MJ Melendez.
MJ wishes those were his numbers. Okay. I was looking at
there's our opening right there.
And I was going to go with MJ Melendez. He has, I think, a .091 batting average this week, but he only got 11 at-bats, and so I was like, let's leave that alone. No, that is one Vinny Pasquantino's week.
Oh.
A little bit of a rough week for Vinny. Like I said, 3 for 21, 3 RBIs, 1 double. The big thing for him, you see 2 walks to 5 strikeouts. Any week where Vinny doubles up his walk numbers with strikeouts, that's never going to be a good thing for him. He's a guy who should be about even or sometimes even more walks than strikeouts. So, yeah, not a great week, but not losing any confidence. He did some things to contribute to the team, too. He got at least 1 sacrifice fly that I remember from yesterday's game or the day before. He's done some good things still. He just it wasn't his week offensively.
Yeah, I really should have known that if he got 21 at-bats, that wasn't MJ because he isn't playing a ton right now because he's struggling so bad. I should have known. Anyway, I'm going with Will Smith as my week performer. If you're looking for a week performer, it's always nice to look in the bullpen because somebody's had a bad week that week. Will Smith had a bad week this week. He went 1 2/3 innings this week with 3 hits, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. He's a guy who looked like, okay, well, he was having a little bit more success there in the really low leverage innings. He wasn't striking a lot of guys out, but he wasn't giving up runs. And so it was like, okay, maybe they can carry him as the eighth guy out of the bullpen for a little while, see if it catches in some way. But man, he just went out and did not do well again this week. And there's just I don't see a light at the end of this tunnel. Like we said the same thing with Hunter Renfroe, right? Which is like, there are guys like MJ Melendez who struggle, and you're like, okay, the potential is still there, the upside is still there. We've seen him go really cold and really hot before. Hunter Renfroe, Will Smith, these dudes are later in their careers. Nobody gains velocity, especially Will Smith. Nobody gains velocity at what is he, 36, 30, something like that. Nobody gains velocity at that age. Guys' stuff doesn't get a lot better in their mid 30s typically. And so it's hard to see a path where Will Smith becomes somebody they'd be willing to lean on. And the interesting thing is they just dumped Matt Sauer in their bullpen because that roster spot was too valuable as they continued to compete for the division. What happens in July when they're still, right around first in the AL Central and Will Smith is still the eighth guy in their bullpen and is still not pitching well? Do eventually they have to say, we can't afford to keep you on the roster either, right? Like, even though you did so much to help us gather the talent that we have, even though we thought you'd be like a really good presence in the bullpen, or maybe
we thought he was going to be the closer. Remember?
Yeah. What boy does that seem like forever ago? But now in July, I just don't know. But this was always the outcome. Like people were like, "Hey, Will Smith's going to be the closer," but even you and I and everybody else was saying like, "But there's a chance it all just falls apart." Anytime somebody is this old and this long into their career, there's always a chance it just falls apart, right? Like because you're a veteran. That's why they got him for $5 million, right? Like because there was always a chance it was just not going to work. And it really has. Mike, it was a very successful week. I'm feeling very good about it. What's your theme for this week?
My theme is a classic line from a classic film. Okay.
It's a film.
Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And the two teams that we faced, the Tigers and Tampa, probably both struggling to stay at or above 500. We are now the villain in their story because we came in and laid waste, and that's what we have to do. And so as we continue to grow and continue to win, some of those teams are going to see us as the big bad Royals coming into town. And I like that. A little bit. So,
and Mike's a real Harvey Dent enthusiast. You didn't know this, but he was really rooting for Harvey to win that movie.
Well, I did feel like he got the shaft in that film, but okay, whatever.
a little bit, but he was also crazy and kidnapped a child. So I'm going with a line from a classic 90s hit from a really, I think, music visionary or music genius, maybe is the right title for this. And it's from Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. And I don't know if you know, for the younger listeners out there, Marky Mark is now known as Mark Wahlberg. He's
done a couple things.
He's done a couple things in his life. He also went to prison for a while. That's a whole other story. Go read his Wikipedia page. It's real interesting.
He's actually not that good of a person. But
yeah, it turns out he's actually not that good of a person. But anyway, for a while in the early 90s, he was a rapper. Okay? And it sounds hilarious to say now.
It does, right?
And he had a song that was a hit. It was called Good Vibrations. Stole the title from the Beach Boys. But anyway, the part that I'm quoting, he actually doesn't even rap or sing. But the main chorus, I guess you should say, is, "It's such a good vibration. It's such a sweet sensation." Mike, will you just sing that line for us? I know you know it.
I will not.
Okay. All right. I'll sing it then. "It's such a good vibration." Ah. A woman sings this line. "It's such a sweet sensation." That's the line, okay? This is just my feeling of the week. When you're 5-1, I know it was. When you're 5-1, it's a good vibration. It's a sweet sensation.
The vibes are high.
Royals Weekly is brought to you by All In Physical Therapy. You already know that All In Physical Therapy helped turn our mother into the Mountain from Game of Thrones. But what you don't know is that Mom loved her experience there because of the personal attention she got from Tommy and the staff at All In. They guarantee a personalized, one-with-one experience to suit the needs of patients recovering from total joint surgeries, sports injuries, or any kind of injury or pain.
I need to call Tommy because I'm in a tremendous amount of pain from all the fence work we did yesterday.
Hey, man, do more stretching.
Free labor for my brother.
All in Physical Therapy is owned and operated by Tommy Freevert with locations in Blue Springs and Lee Summit. But most importantly, they're in network for nearly all insurance providers.
I actually hang out there just for the in-networkness. I just hang out and experience how good it feels to be in network.
It's nice. It's like a warm blanket. If you're a high school athlete recovering from injury or someone bouncing back with a brand new hip or knee, check out the best physical therapy in the KC Metro at allin-pt.com. That's ALLIN-pt.com. Or give them a call at 816-427-5300. That's 816-427-5300. On this week's Spotlight segment, we're going to talk about the offense. We got to talk about the offense. The lineup was the unit that represented the greatest thorn in the side of the Royals for most of the season. We've spent a lot of these Spotlight segments asking, why isn't this offense doing better? Then a couple weeks ago, they started scoring like crazy. The loss today not only snapped a winning streak, it also snapped a streak of 8 straight games in which the Royals scored at least 5 runs. They scored at least 7 runs in 6 of those games and at least 8 in 5 of those games. In that span, the team has the highest weighted runs created plus in Major League Baseball. Mike, what's happened? How is this offense hotter than a firecracker?
2 very important reasons. The first one is the same reason why the offense did well when it did before that, and that's the top of the lineup. Maikel Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino, Salvador Perez, and then whoever you put in the 5 spot has had some success. When it's Michael Massey, it's Michael Massey. When it's Fermin, it's Fermin, whatever. But those 4 have carried this offense the entire year, and they had another great stretch. But the change here is
the chaser. Call it the chaser.
The chaser. That was, yeah. Okay, those guys are the shot, and the chaser is the bottom of the lineup was on base more in this last week, in these last couple weeks, when the offense has been better. And I'm talking about these guys. Adam Frazier, yes, Garrett Hampson, in a small amount, yes, Garrett Hampson, Hunter Renfroe, Nelson Velasquez, and Freddie Fermin all had on-base percentages over 400 this week. They are on base. The guys at the top are driving them in. It can be that easy. And you and I have been calling for more on-base ability at the bottom of the lineup for a very long time.
Yeah, we mentioned a few weeks ago that it looked like the lineup was due for some positive regression as a whole, because as a team, they were like, their batting average was well below their expected batting average, and all these expected outcomes were better for them as a team. It looks like they're getting some of that positive regression from guys at the bottom of the lineup, from Frazier, from Renfroe, from Velasquez, from Hampson and Fermin and things like that. And that OBP over 400, that is a huge, huge stat for the bottom of the lineup, because you mean that every one of those guys has every one of those guys over 400. That's crazy, right? Like, and anytime you can do that at the bottom of a lineup, the odds of you having a success offensively are really good. Every team or most teams have a few good hitters at the top of the lineup. It's usually depth in the lineup that kills those teams. And so if you have guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, even 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th spots that are getting on base, you have a much better chance of creating these big innings as your big hitters at the top of the lineup hit extra base hits with those guys on base. So it's really worked out well. I think one of the things that sort of correlates with a lot of this is Massey coming off the IL and being really hot. He's been a big part of the offensive upsurge. He's hitting home runs. He's getting extra base hits. That's lengthened their lineup by at least 1 spot, and 1 spot is a lot when you only have 9 hitters. And so, his offensive surge has sort of been in lockstep with the offensive surge of the entire team. Mike, we know that Matt Quintero likes to rotate hitters a lot, especially at the bottom of the lineup. What, in your mind, should that rotation look like?
Well, I think we have to, for probably the first time on this show, mention it, because I hear it from the people that I talk to about the Royals. I hear it on Threads, managing our Threads account. It might be time to start talking about sending Melendez down to free up that spot for some people who are doing more productive things in the lineup. Whether that's going to be Lofton, now that it looks like Adam Frazier is going to be taking over for Massey pretty consistently here in the next at least 10 days, or Frazier back there when Massey gets back, somebody else can be playing that corner outfield position and producing at a higher level than what MJ is right now, or what MJ is capable of right now. Get him down to AAA, get him fixed, get him back to making better swing decisions, get his swing mechanics back where he needs to be, and then we can reevaluate that. But I do think getting some of those guys time, a Frazier, making sure Velasquez, if he's picking it up, is I would only ever have him DH, but I would have him in the DH spot frequently.
He made that awesome catch the other night at the wall.
Well, I know he made one awesome catch, and that's great. Okay, but he doesn't get so many balls, and yeah, he's just not very good out there. But no, I do think rotating quite a bit and maximizing those guys' potential is going to be important. We've talked about it a lot with Hunter Renfroe. Let's start doing it with all of them.
Well, the weird thing is he is doing it with all of them, but he's not sending all of them down. And so I'm going to disagree with you, as I am wont to do. I don't think Melendez should be sent down. I think the Royals have proven to us that sending guys down is not really the thing that gets them back to good. So like Velasquez, everybody's calling for him to be sent down. And some of these other guys, people have been calling, send him down, send him down, send him down. That's not the thing that gets somebody to be better against major league pitching. And I think you're right that Melendez should be heavily rotated out.
Yeah.
Yes, heavily rotated out while he's not hitting. But you have to give him opportunities to come back in and see major league pitching and hit against it in order to feel like, okay, I'm implementing the swing changes or whatever, approach changes, swing changes that we're talking about in the cages a lot. I'm implementing those today against major league quality pitching to know whether or not it will be successful in the major league level, right? So like, yeah, maybe he only plays 2 times a week right now until he figures things out. But when he does, he's right back in there. He's a cornerstone of your offense, and maybe he gets hot and it looks a lot better then. That's what they did with Velasquez, and now it looks like he's going to be he might be turning a corner, and I think that's really the approach that they want to take. And honestly, because of the huge gap in pitching between AAA and the majors, I'm starting to lean towards that being a much more successful strategy than sending guys down to AAA, especially guys who are supposed to be cornerstones of your lineup. Personally, I want to see a lot of rotation that includes things like Renfroe sitting against velocity. We've seen that be effective at times. I want to see Lofton get all the time against lefties and half the time against righties. So I want him to play a lot, right? And then I want Frazier to play almost exclusively against righties. I want Hampson exclusively against lefties, that sort of thing. We've brought up Garrett Hampson a couple times, Mike, and I know that this is going to be a weird subject for a lot of Royals fans because he has cultivated a lot of animosity, I guess is the way of putting it. Garrett Hampson is now hitting 311. 311 as a batting average with an OPS of 750 right now. So he is an above league average hitter right now. Mike, do we all owe Garrett Hampson an apology?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No. He cultivated that animosity by playing like garbage. Okay? Playing like hot garbage. And even in this nice little run that he's having right now, he still gets thrown out on the base paths like every time he gets on. It drives me effing crazy. What are we doing, man? He got thrown out between second and third the other day, like got caught in a rundown. The day before that, he got picked up first. It's like there is no good thing. No, I'm happy he's doing, better. I want him to produce in the roles that they give him. But you and I have always said it's not about what you can do. It's really about what the guy behind you can do, right? Do you feel like Garrett Hampson, even with the production he's had recently, is going to be all that more productive than your average, than a replacement level player?
I think I don't know. It's tough, right? Like he is one of those kind of dudes who he is made to be the 26th, 25th guy on a roster, and he might perform just well enough for that, but it'll always be difficult to know whether or not the next guy could be better, right? Because a lot of guys might be that good. Might be is the relative word there, right? And so like Hampson provides speed on the base paths, but not a ton of base running savvy. Hampson provides
base running savvy. None.
Hampson provides the ability to play multiple positions, including center field and shortstop, which is a very rare and valuable thing, right?
Tyler Tolbert does it.
Yeah, but he could never hit as well as Hampson's not great, but he could never hit as well as Hampson at the major league level right now. And so yeah, I don't know. I think we do owe Garrett Hampson a slight apology for some things. I think we should give him credit for the fact that he's on a hot streak. I think some of this hot streak is unsustainable. He will not hit 311 this year. I'm going to just go out on a limb and predict that. But he has been doing some things offensively to help the team lately, and that's great to see.
Our friend over at One Royal Way, Joel Penfield, actually put something out about this too. I think his bat BIP in that time period he's been really crushing the ball is like over 600. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
non-sustainable. You are correct.
It is non-sustainable. But Hampson, that's who he was when they signed him. He had a good year last year. It's all batted ball success. That he is not great when it comes to things like managing strikeouts and doing like an efficient version of hitting. He that's not him. Like he strikes out a lot. He doesn't walk that much. He lives and dies by the ball in play. Right now it's working out for him. That won't happen all year, but it's good to see that it's working out for him right now. He's also done some things like bunting and things like that have been fairly useful for the Royals. Mike, should we forget, because the Royals are having so much more success offensively? Sorry, somebody's walking by my window. Because the Royals are having so much more success offensively, do we need to forget about adding a bat at the trade deadline?
No, we don't need to forget about it. We need to. I think you do still go out there and look for somebody who can make the on base ability of your bottom third more consistent. Because I don't know that it's going to. Those guys aren't going to continue to be that consistent because that's not the hitters they have been throughout their career for the most part. You mentioned Hampson. He's not going to keep an OBP over 400 for the rest of the year. Neither will Renfroe, and neither will any of those guys. Honestly, that's just not really who they are. Now, if Velasquez is actually turning a corner, I think that's what really hinges on whether you need to go get a bat or not. If he's turned a corner and he starts turning into the Nelson Velasquez he was last year, that goes a long way into not needing to focus on a bat. Maybe then your focus turns to a relief arm at the trade deadline instead. But if he's still volatile and it's still, 1 week of nothing, 1 week of hitting, 1 week of nothing, then I think you still look for some on-base ability at the bottom of the lineup and somebody who probably helps you in the corner outfield position.
Yeah, it seems like maybe the priority has gotten a little more specific there, which is like we need on-base ability in the bottom third of the lineup. So they know probably where that needs to come from and what that needs to look like. I do think you're right. I think it is on-base ability. I think that's really what it's about down at the bottom of that lineup because most of the time they're going to have Kyle Isbell in there, and you just know that even when he's doing well, the on-base ability is not going to be tremendous from him. And so your 9-hole is not going to be great. Other than that, you need to get on base. Hunter Renfroe doesn't get on base that well. Frazier does occasionally get on base well, but you really need more on base ability in that bottom third. And we'll try and solve it with rotation and maximizing matchups and things like that. But a bat would really help, I think, especially if Nelson Velasquez is not really turning a corner. Royals Weekly is brought to you by Eric Oxer of West USA Realty. Phoenix has all of our favorite things: year-round golf, year-round baseball, and Eric Oxer of West USA Realty. Whether you want to buy your dream retirement home or just stay a while and catch spring training, Eric can help you find the perfect house. We've known him for 30 years and trust him far more than we even trust each other.
Mark told me I was coming over for his dog's second birthday party. I ended up doing backbreaking manual labor all day.
I don't even have a dog. Eric does long-term rentals for the snowbird crowd and home sales and purchases for those who want to stay a while longer. Are you a baseball player or parent who needs a place to stay in the Phoenix area? Eric will find you the perfect spot fast. Want to spend your days shanking golf balls into the great beyond? Eric knows the golf scene like Mike knows the backstory of cult leader Chuck E. Cheese. Find Eric online at ericoxer.com if you can figure out how to spell his name. ERICKAUXIER.com. Or just shoot him a text at 480-383-9745. That's 480-383-9745. Even if you're just curious about what he can do for you, he's 100% no pressure, one of the best people we know.
And he stops driving to allow turtles to cross the street.
The Royals continue a very weird road trip to start the week. They started the road trip in Detroit, went to Tampa, then they'll head to Minnesota for a 4-game series against the Twins this week. Has MLB just never heard of global warming? What's going on here? They're like flying this way, flying that way. It's insane. It makes no. I'm not a huge geography buff, but I don't think that route makes much sense. You know what I'm saying? Anyway,
I don't know.
After all that, they'll fly back to KC for a 3-game series against the Padres. That's right. We get 7 games this week, every single day. Awesome. Mike, tell us about our division rival, Minnesota Twins.
Well, they're pretty good. Okay. They're 28-24, which is good for third in the AL Central. That's already 7.5 games back because Cleveland refuses to lose a baseball game. But this is a very solid baseball team, a very good baseball team. You'll remember we lost the opening series of the season to them, 2-1, but they're good. So the first day, that first game tomorrow will be a day game. First off, it'll be Alec Marsh versus Joe Ryan, one of my favorite non-Royals pitchers, by the way. 27-year-old right-handed pitcher out of Cal State Stanislaus, 3.15 ERA for Joe Ryan and just a .98 whip. He's got a four-seam fastball that averages in the mid to low 90s, a splitter, a sweeper, and a slider. He's having the best season of his career, and it's probably because his velocity has gone up across the board, but especially on the fastball and splitter combination. He is a great pitcher. I really like Joe Ryan. In the second game, we'll get Cole Reagan's Day versus Simeon Wood Richardson. Never heard of him. 23-year-old right-hander out of Kepner High School in Sugar Land, Texas. 2.57 ERA and a 1.11 whip. Those sound pretty good. He's got a four-seamer that averages 93, a slider, a changeup, and a curveball. He's made 7 starts, and his expected ERA is about a run higher than his actual ERA. Teams hit his fastball pretty well. He doesn't walk many, but he doesn't strike out many either. And he also generates a lot of ground balls. So
no, he does not generate
a lot of
ground balls.
So let's try and put some out. All right.
Yeah, he's a weird one. When I was looking
Target's
into
a pretty
him,
big place.
It's hard to really pinpoint why he has success. And the only way I can put it is he's like Michael Wacha to some degree. He misses enough barrels, even though he doesn't generate a ton of ground balls. He just stays just enough off the barrel to not get hit super hard.
Well, hopefully we can change that. Salvador Perez kills it at Target Field, so maybe he'll put a couple out. In that last game of the – no, wait, that can't be the last game.
No, that's the third game. I forgot to put the last game on here.
Oh, okay.
Talk about it, and I'll look it up.
Real professional stuff there, Mark.
Sorry, forgot it was a 4-gamer and not a 3-gamer.
Okay, well, the third game we'll get Seth Lugo against a guy we've seen quite a bit the last few years, Bailey Ober, the 28-year-old righty out of College of Charleston. He's got a 4.33 ERA, which is a little bit better than what his whip is, for 1.04 whip. He's got a fastball in the low 90s, a changeup, a cutter, and a slider. His expected ERA is 3.4, which is actually better than his actual ERA. We got him for 8 earned runs and 1 1/3 inning earlier in this season, so hopefully we can do that again. Big, tall, right-handed pitcher, 95th percentile in extension because he's 6 feet 9 inches tall.
Speaking of real tall people, the fourth game of that series will be Brady Singer versus Chris Paddock, a 28-year-old right-handed pitcher out of Central Park High School in Texas. He has a 4.39 ERA and a 1.39 whip, a guy who throws a four-seamer, changeup, slider, curveball combination. He sits at about 93, 94 these days. Used to throw a little harder. In fact, his four-seamer's down about 2 miles an hour, more than 2 miles an hour this year. I know that's pretty significant, but he's still finding a way to get guys out. He's a veteran, does not walk many people at all. Doesn't strike out that many people either. Again, has a crazy extension because he's so tall, 6'5", but a guy who the Royals might be able to get a hold of if they can get some good batted ball outcomes against him. So it'll be Singer versus Paddock in that last game of the Twins series. Then they'll head back home to Kansas City to face the San Diego Padres, an interleague game. Padres are 28-28, good enough for third in the NL West behind the Dodgers, I think, are leading that division. Offensively, they're an above-average team. They have a 109 weighted runs created plus, which is good enough for 7th in Major League Baseball. They are getting a career year from Jurickson Profar.
Finally.
I know, it's wild. Jurickson Profar was the number 1 prospect in baseball, if you don't remember this. Everybody was like, this dude's a 5-tool guy, speed, power, offense, great defender, all these sorts of things. Then he gets in the major leagues and he's more of a utility guy. He never really found it offensively. And so he kind of bounced around a lot of places and he, was a valuable player, but he wasn't like a superstar in any stretch of the imagination. He has a 170 OPS plus right now in like 180 plate appearances. He is their best hitter by far. And hopefully he gets a little late career all-star game. I think that would be a cool thing to see for him. He's 31 years old at this point, but great to see him having a career year later in his life. I'm sorry, not later in his life. He's going to live for a long, long time.
Later in his baseball
later
career.
in his baseball career. Yeah. Jake Cronenworth and Fernando Tatis Jr. are also having solid years for them offensively. Pitching wise, it's a little more mediocre for them. They're 16th in ERA as a pitching staff at 4 earned run average. Dylan Cease is having a bounce back season for them, which is nice to see for him. He's Riggs' favorite player, by the way. Cool. Mostly because he has a mustache and does yoga. That makes her like, ooh, Dylan Cease. 3.29 ERA from him. They're also getting another stellar year from Yu Darvish, as is typical. Everyone else in their rotation, not very good, pretty bad actually. The bullpen though is solid across the board, so they can really pitch it in the bullpen. Let's hope they avoid Darvish and Cease in the rotation. We'll end this week's episode like we end every episode with the Just a Bit Outside segment, where we talk about something that's interesting to us outside the world of baseball. Mike, I know you did something interesting yesterday when you helped me put up a fence that looks professional quality, frankly. But tell me what else is going on for you this week.
That fence is never going to make it.
That fence, hey, it withstood the storm last night. Handle that.
My thing is about the value of old gaming systems. So you and I grew up with not a whole lot of money, right? Our mother was a single mom, but we have a lot of older brothers in our family, and they kind of all knew that we loved playing video games like most children do. And so no matter what, they always kind of worked to get us new gaming systems. Now, it wasn't always like right when they came out or anything like that, but we were fortunate to get several different gaming systems throughout our lives. And I actually hung on to some of them. And you may have too. I don't know. Do you still have the GameCube?
No, I did up until probably before I moved back here. I think I might have.
Okay. Well, I still have like our original Nintendo 64 that we got when we were really young. I have an old PlayStation as well. And I have a PlayStation 3 that I actually got from one of our brothers when I was an adult. And I haven't really bought new gaming systems recently outside of a Switch that my in-laws got us because I don't have time to play as much anymore. But what I've discovered is there's still great value in those old systems. And so what I did was I took the PlayStation 3 and the Nintendo 64. I actually used them this year at my school, and some of my students got the opportunity to play on those at various times, and they loved them. You know why? Because when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, you don't really know. Like, those things are still good. And these are for kids that have brand new PlayStations and brand new Xboxes and all that sort of stuff. But when you can say, hey, I've got the last NCAA football game that they made on this PlayStation 3, if you guys want to try it out, they go crazy for it. Or, hey, I've got Mario Kart on Nintendo 64. You guys want to see what it was like playing video games in 95? Here you go. Like they really like it. And I do too. So I brought my PlayStation home. I'm going to play some NCAA on the PlayStation 3 this summer. And you know what? It's fun still, right? So hang on to those things. Show them to your kids. My in-laws actually have a Wii that they kept, like a Wii Active, like one of the things you move with. We're going to let my son play with that whenever he's old enough to understand what's going on. And I'm excited for that. And so hang on to those old gaming systems and see if you can't use them years down the road. Because you know what? What excited a 6-year-old 20 years ago, it still does.
It does. I mean, it is a ton of fun to break those out and play. Every once in a while, Mike and I get a wild hair and we have a little time. Like if we have a week where we can just hang out or whatever, we get a wild hair and we start playing Legend of Zelda on that 64. Yeah. It hasn't happened in a few years, but I assume at some point it will happen again. Even though I own the new Zelda games on the Switch and stuff like that, we'll go back and we'll play Ocarina of Time because it's awesome, right? We'll play GoldenEye because it's awesome. Right. I just love that everybody who listens to this show must be like, I want to go to the Michael Mead school. All you do is talk about baseball and play video games.
Yeah. Talk about baseball. We play video games. We watch National Treasure. That is exactly what we do.
The Michael Mead curriculum, y'all. My Just About Outside for this week is a shout out, and it is a shout out to my neighbors. So when I moved in here, you never know what kind of neighbors you're going to get, right? What do they say? You can't pick your family. You also can't pick your neighbors, right? And so it's a real crapshoot. I got insanely lucky because my neighbors have been wonderful people who help me understand the neighborhood, help me when I need to do house-related stuff. They're just both very nice people. I'm going to say their first names, Rachel, Tucker. I'm sure you don't listen to this show, but You are both wonderful. And it is great having great neighbors. So I needed to put up this fence, or I wanted to put up this fence because my old fence was basically falling down. And one of them is between my yard and their yard, and they have dogs and I don't. And we sort of worked together to like have a tree taken down, take out all this fencing. Rachel, who is wonderful and way younger and stronger and more energetic than me, came out and like basically took all this fencing out with us, where she did a ton of the work. And then Mike knows she was there for putting in posts too yesterday. She did a bunch of that work too. Just a real. She must do CrossFit or something that's like really active, because she is like
she just never stops. She never stops.
She's like the Energizer Bunny. It was great, but they're also just wonderful people to talk to and hang out with. So after we tore out the fence, we just started a little fire in the backyard in our little fire pit, hung out with them, drank some beers. I didn't, but everybody else did, and just chatted. It was just a great experience to sort of hang out with them. Mike, I know, has had an opposite experience with a neighbor. So I have a perspective that it is nice to have really great neighbors. And I love having that sense of community here. I have other great neighbors across the street who I say hi to and talk to right over across the way here. They're wonderful too. And so I'm really grateful living in a community and in a place where the people I get to interact with are like positive and actually actively trying to help me and my partner succeed as homeowners. So thank you, Rachel and Tucker. You're awesome. That's all we have for this week. You should be awesome too. Be awesome by subscribing to the Royals Weekly Substack, by leaving us comments, by leaving us reviews on Apple Podcasts,
supporting the Royals,
and by supporting our sponsors like All in Physical Therapy, Eric Ocher of West USA Realty, and Bet Online. Thanks for joining us here at Royals Weekly, presented by Bet Online. We'll talk to you next week. Until then, be good to each other.
And go Royals.